a bar in New Orleans.
All right, well, after we chat about Hammer 13, we're about to start talking about the game, the story of the game, and to kind of kick that off, have you guys seen the most recent trailer from Mafia 3, the story trailer? Let's take a look at it once again, because this is where we're going to be forming our discussion.
The other way. Oh,
Let's just kind of talk big picture. And, you know, when people think of sort of gangster narratives, I think because of the influence of The Godfather and Cotton Club moves to that hill, there's a lot of association with the East Coast and in, you know, mid-late 40s, early 50s. This game is in New Orleans, really based on New Orleans, and it's 1968. While that may not sort of say, oh, yeah, that doesn't scream, you know, gangster, it's actually a very sort of appropriate time and setting. There were gangsters, and there were gangsters in New Orleans in that time in America.
Yeah, sure. So obviously New Orleans, our fictionalized version of New Orleans, but the real New Orleans has a very, very long history of organized crime. In fact, it's often credited as being one of the first cities in the country to have organized crime. It goes back to the 1890s. And even through the 1900s, there was an officer named Carlos Marcello who basically ran the city. And he was a very interesting fellow in that he kicked up to the 5 families in New York, but he was basically allowed carte blanche to run New Orleans how he saw fit. So there's a very rich connection to the Mafia in real world New Orleans that we tapped into. But also as part of this is the connection with the black mob, which is also another real connection that's existed in multiple American cities.
So Hayden, you know, you're starting out on Mafia 3, obviously you're having previous Mafia games. You know, with setting and time period, you're trying to move in a different direction. What are kind of your core tenets of what you set out to accomplish with this game?
Yeah, so when I, again, started working on Mafia 3 and knew that, you know, we'd be, I think, 13 working on this franchise, before we even started thinking about the game itself and what the game should be, we started looking at what do we think of Mafia, anything it needs to be, right? What are the kind of franchise builders for something called Mafia, whether it was a movie or a comic book or a video game, and obviously using the 2 previous games as inspiration. So for me, it kind of came down to a couple pillars. One is it's about organized crime. This isn't a game or a story about anarchy or lawlessness or just crime in the streets. It's very much about organized crime and the hierarchies and the tradition and rules that are associated with organized crime. The next is that, you know, Mafia story should feature a gifted anti-hero, so not somebody that has kind of heroic qualities in this that we might expect, but that is, you know, does have some and is gifted in some ways. And you know, we talked a little bit about how Lincoln is later, but and then the city is the main character. That's another one. So we really focused on the city, making sure that it felt like it evolved and changed over time. And then the last one to go for us is that it's historical pulp fiction. So it's this idea that it is fiction, but it's set in a time and a place that's real. It references real events. Hopefully, it feels authentic to the time period. But it is again fiction, and it's pulp fiction in the sense that it deals with kind of the salacious side of things. So we don't make any bones about the fact that these guys are all, you know, criminals. They're, you know, doing criminal things in our world.
And then Bill, I mean, it's interesting because obviously there is the Italian Mafia that's in New Orleans, but you know, when you're playing Lincoln, you're kind of taking back crime from this established group. And that is kind of appropriate to that time. This was the beginning of the downfall of the Italian mob in America.
Yeah, historically, you know, the FBI didn't even acknowledge the existence of the Italian Mafia until I think 1957, thereabouts. So for a long time, the Italian Mafia basically was covered on two fronts. They had the size to kind of fend off the competition, but also law enforcement really wasn't targeting them. And that started to change in the 60s, mid-60s and late 60s. So that's another reason we chose 1968, because it's kind of the kernel of the downfall of what we consider the golden age of the Italian Mafia. And obviously, fictionally within our world, Lincoln Clay is a big catalyst for that change, specifically in New Bordeaux.
So yeah, let's talk about New Bordeaux. I like you said there, Hayden, how you consider that to be a character in and of itself. It's very clearly based on New Orleans, but you guys, you know, I think consistent with the franchise, decided to have a fictionalized sort of corollary to the actual New Orleans. Why did you choose that city? Obviously, we know that there was organized crime there. And then, what about choosing a New Orleans as city? Like, what does that afford you creatively?
So I think, you know, we considered a lot of different settings early on, and for me it came down to I wanted a city that felt like, you know, it was believable that crime could be there, and I think that in the mob, and so you need things like industry, you need tourism, you need entertainment, you need all the things that the mob kind of can grab hold of and kind of operate within. So that's kind of one hand, but then we also wanted it to be kind of an aspirational city, and a city that people look at and go, well, if I was a monster, then I might have some fun. And I think it kind of boiled down to, you know, New Orleans is a sexy city, it's a fun city, there's that crush of music and cultures, which is very interesting to us, which we had, again, with Empire Bay to some extent as well. And it just feels very different from Empire Bay, which was another thing that was important to us. We want to continue to grow the Mafia universe and add cities that feel, you know, different every time. And so ultimately, you look at it and go, yeah, it feels like a real place.
Well, it's an iconic and recognizable city as well, and that's something that's